You are listening to Inspirado Projecto. Get ready.
Get ready, ladies and gentlemen, creatures and extraterrestrials, one and all, young and old, identities and multi-singularities. This is going to be a deep cosmic dive, this episode. So get ready, buckle up, folks. We're talking with Wiley Herman, the creator of Grandview Boulevard, writer of In Bright Axiom, writer of The Tolls, collaborator on Christor Inc. You're going to hear him discuss all kinds of creativity. This is part one. He's going to talk about his buddy Spencer McCall, who we have interviewed on the show before. And you're going to get some fun secrets. I didn't know what questions to ask him, because I had so many questions zooming in all at once. They all wanted my attention. They're like, ask me, ask me, ask me. So I did the best I could navigating through the... I get those images of like when, like in those movies where you see people go on vacation. This has never happened to me because I haven't gone to foreign lands per se. But, you see how the folks, they step off the plane and all the little kids start, begging, yanking on their clothes. I want some, I want some. That's kind of like what it was like with these questions. Ask me, ask me, ask me. So, this is part one of that, folks. I'm gonna put links in this description to the places that you can check out these phenomenons that we are referring to. They are mind expanders. They are fun imagination theme parks. You're going to love them. I promise you. I promise you. Stay tuned, because Wiley's up next, folks.
David Lynch personally started a campaign in Hollywood to get Laura Dern an Oscar nomination for her performance in Inland Empire. He sat on the side of the road with a cow during this campaign, which was, unfortunately, unsuccessful. Stay tuned to Inspirado Projecto for more fun facts.
Grandview Boulevard is so fun and so textured and so layered, and I like all the little Easter eggs in there. It's so great that Wiley and the family is watching the Institute on the TV, and the phone call with In Bright Axiom. It's just so cool to see how it's all woven together, man.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's got like way more meta once In Bright Axiom came out. It's just like another layer of, okay, now it's commenting on yet another film, within a documentary, within an actual family, and that's like my favorite kind of story to tell.
Me too, man. Me too. That idea of crossing all of these universes together. Well, and in the case with with Christor Inc., how that's then parallel versions, parallel universes. That's in addition,
it's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's kind of like a poor man's Charlie Kaufman light kind of, like a kind of less heady Charlie Kaufman is a low budget, less heady Charlie Kaufman. Which is kind of like
so much,
the realm I exist in.
Well, it's so exciting because you got a whole world here that can just continually be built upon, and whatever projects you make, they can always reference this universe that's going on here. So those who have been following along can go, ooh, how does that fit into the timeline? Or, which timeline is it fitting into? Which parallel universe is it fitting into, and which timeline? And, which Coleman is the Coleman, and it's just like, It's so much fun. Are you who are some of your favorite philosophers?
Oh man, that's a tricky question because I was never really into philosophy. Like I'm a film guy like through and through, so all my philosophy, comes from film. My wife is the academic in the family. She's a college English teacher, so she'd probably be able to answer the actual philosophical, list. But
Well,
yeah, man, I was just
your
yeah, go ahead.
subject matters they're just deep in terms of there's just a lot of layers going on there, and a lot of sort of like universal questions that are kind of filtering through there. So it just kind of made me wonder, what that might be, what some of your influences might be that contribute towards this.
Well, it's funny because I was an '80s kid, so I grew up with like '80s sci-fi. So I just remember like my brain being cracked open just by like Back to the Future. Just that thought of like, oh my God, butterfly effect, something in the past can affect the future, and that just opened up the entire realm of science fiction storytelling for me. So like that alone, it's like, wait, you could change one thing, and it could have this snowball effect that would affect the future, and it started there for me, like definitively. Back to the Future in 1985, like that's where my love for that kind of, if you can call it philosophy, started.
Did you write a lot of stories about time travel?
No, I never really got into writing until post high school. I was a performer kid, like for a very long time. I guess you could say, yeah, pretty much the first 20 years of my professional, career, I was an actor, and then I kind of slowly started to play with playwriting, and then eventually screenwriting. Almost 20 years into my career. But yeah, I was more of a performer than a writer for most of my existence, really.
What kind of performing were you in a theater, musical theater, improvisation?
Mostly theater. I did theater in Tucson for many, many years, and then I moved to Los Angeles and started doing improv there at the Groundlings. And then that kind of brought me around to San Francisco, where I started to do more and more on-camera stuff, got an agent, and then theater, improv led me to playwriting. So I produced my first play in like 2009, I think, which was a fairly good success considering it was the first time out. But that was like my first really attempt at writing that felt like, oh, there's something here to explore. So basically starting in 2009 is when I started to really dive into writing.
And what was your first play?
So it was kind of a dark comedy called Better Homes and Ammo, and it was about a suburban family who've locked themselves in a nuclear fallout shelter after this event that may or may not have actually happened. It was kind of like the proto, what is that, 9 Cloverfield Lane? What was that great film?
Oh yeah,
with
John
Kent.
Yeah,
it was kind of like a similar vibe to that. It's like, what is actually happening outside this bunker, and who's manipulating who to stay underground, and what's actually out there. And then ends up being a love story between the 2 teenage siblings, but one's adopted, so it's not as creepy as it sounds. But yeah, so it was a really fun exploration of kind of madness and, this whole survivalist thing that now is like totally normal. But in 2009, it's like, whoa, people actually think like this. And now it's like, oh yeah, people are actually living this.
Wow. I was just going to say there's a little piece of that when you mentioned that, it reminded me a little bit of the Royal Tenenbaums, how, oh gosh, I forgot what Gwyneth Paltrow's sister's name is, but she's adopted into it, and Luke Wilson's character always was just in love with her, and then they end up finding out that she was adopted.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's so interesting how, and I'm sure you probably have noticed this many times throughout your life, where you write something like the play that you did, and then you end up seeing echoes of that similar zeitgeist, that spirit, kind of camouflaged in another project that someone does in the future.
It's zeitgeist. Well, it's not even future. Sometimes it's like literally simultaneous. Like my short film. Did you watch The Tolls, the World War II?
Oh yeah.
So the craziest thing about that, it's this. I wanted to do a modern take on a Twilight Zone story. Like a 23-minute Twilight Zone episode. So it's about a World War II soldier who's transported to an alternate reality where the Nazis won. And like literally the week we finished principal photography, I got a text from my mom saying, have you heard about this TV show? I just saw a trailer. It's called Man in the High Castle. And I'm a Philip K. Dick fan, but I was just not familiar with that particular story. And I watched the trailer and I'm like, that's the movie we just
Wow,
shot.
man.
And this was within days of wrapping
Dude.
photography. So again, it's zeitgeist. It happens all the time.
You know, it's
as
incredible.
an artist.
Okay, so now this is the next question concerning that, because the same thing would happen to me growing up, and I still see it happen.
Yeah.
When you first started noticing that type of thing happening to you, was how did you view it? When you first started noticing these types of synchronicities happening, how did it affect you?
Oh, like profoundly. Like it was kind of my first introduction to like there's something else going on. That was like my first introduction to like the reality of science fiction. Sometimes it's like life is more amazing than fiction when stuff like that happens, when it's just so spot on and so in your face. Like there's a reason that there are parallel storytellers telling almost this exact same story at this exact same moment. Science fiction becomes reality, and then it makes it way more profound and personal, I think.
Now, as you found that happening more and more, either, on projects that maybe you had written down, you go, oh, this would be a fun idea for a character, then that exact character pops up in a movie, or an idea for a song or whatever, and then you end up seeing it happening out there in the world. Did you start finding yourself going, hey, you know what? I'm going to sort of follow my intuition a lot more. I'm going to, evidently, my ideas are being also created out there in the world, so evidently I'm on the right track.
Well, it's tricky because it's often kind of deflating, because it's like you have this idea that you feel is original and fresh,
right?
And then you feel like then you realize someone with a bigger budget and more influence has done something either identical or extremely similar. The question is, well, it's still my original idea. Do I pursue it, or do I stop?
Oh, man,
like me and Spencer McCall, who introduced us. We were working on a pilot for a TV show called Bombed, and it's about this post-apocalyptic like Mad Max landscape where a group of traveling actors, they travel across the Mad Max hellscape in a caravan, performing episodes of old like 90s TV shows, at least what they can remember from them. And then it turns out there's a book, and I can't think of the name of it, which is like almost the exact same thing, but it's a bunch of Shakespearean actors who don't actually have the text. It's just like what they remember of the text, and they go around in a post-apocalyptic caravan performing Shakespeare.
Wow.
And then there was another play that we didn't know about, Mr. Burns. Have you heard about that one? It's based on The Simpsons.
No.
It's a post-apocalyptic caravan traveling post-apocalyptic landscape performing Simpsons episodes.
Whoa.
So like all three of these things happened simultaneously, and I hadn't heard of either of them until we basically had the pilot, laid out.
Oh man.
So it's just you can't deny it when it's right there, and it's just like I said, it's just zeitgeist. It's parallel thinking, it's collective consciousness, but it's real.
Gosh, it really is. And it's so funny because I used to get growing up, I used to get so frustrated and just so angry about this, going, oh my God, someone else is out there is making my thing.
I had dibs.
And yeah, right, exactly. It's like, dude, I had dibs on that thing. And then I started, because I would start to help me sort of cope with it. I would devise this. I had this idea that, okay, so these thoughts are coming to us, and I imagined a thought cloud, like, okay, here are these magnificent ideas, and it's going just kind of floating over my head, and it's going, okay, are you going to use me? Are you going to use me? Because I'm moving. Are you going to use me?
I'm your conduit.
Exactly. And it's like, if I felt like if I jumped on it fast enough, then I could be the one that got credit for doing that thing. Then it became sort of like this little competition between, because once you start seeing that your stuff evidently is out there and being created by other folks, then you're like, okay, apparently I'm plugged into something here. Now the thing is to go, how fast can I strike? You got to strike the iron when it's hot. So then that started inspiring to go, okay, I just got to follow the intuition here. I just got to keep following it. In this sense. And you're right. It is such a tricky. I was just thinking about this the other day about how there are these companies that say, okay, well, if you come in and you pitch your idea to us, let's say if you're a writer and you pitch an idea to this company and they go, okay, well, if we, you have to sign this thing because if we already happen to have that idea and we get it, made, you can't sue us for saying that we stole your idea. So I'd always think like, oh my God, that's so terrible, because then the people there might just be taking your idea and pretending that they were the ones who already had the idea. But then I thought, okay, what if I were to place myself in the shoes of that company that is allowing writers to come in and pitch their ideas to me. Then it's like, oh my God, I already had this idea sitting back there in the archives of my brain going, oh, someday I'm going to create this. Now all of a sudden here's this writer who then tells me this idea that's almost exactly like that. Now you're stuck at this standstill because now you're going, oh God, do I bring this person, into the original idea I had? Can we blend those things together and we both, use this enthusiasm, bring this to light? Do I just say, no, sorry, we already have an idea like that, but then would I be hesitant in making that idea because I wouldn't want that guy to think that I stole that idea? So
yeah.
you're such in a weird, it's such a strange thing when you're dealing with ideas in the universe, huh?
Yeah, well, it also comes down to like ideas versus like scripted content. Like I remember when I was living in Los Angeles, like the first spec script that I wrote was with my roommate, and it was a King of the Hill episode that we pitched to the producers. And the B story was Bobby Hill going to a gay rodeo. And, we submitted the script and, got rejected and never heard from him again. And then, of course, lo and behold, a couple months later, there's an episode where the Hills go to, there's a gay rodeo.
No.
They go to, but the thing is, that's an idea, but
Dude.
nothing from our script was ripped off. No characters, no
What
dialogue.
Crazy. Oh gosh.
So again, is it coincidence? Did they already have a gay rodeo? Because it seems oddly specific. So yeah, it's just something like if someone has the same idea, that's one thing. But if they're actually like somehow using your words and your dialogue and your character, that's like a lawsuit, So
wow,
there's a fine line there.
Wow, this reminds me so much. I was listening to like there were two movies that had come out about Truman Capote. One was called Capote, and one was called I think it was called like Infamous or something. And one of them came out, and then some months had gone by, and I had a roommate who was just always listening to NPR, always listening to all day long. And so I'd walk through there and I heard this conversation going on with a director for the movie, whatever the second one was that was coming out. And they're like, well, what are your thoughts about the fact that a Truman Capote movie already exists and now you're coming out this one? And that guy goes, you know what? He goes, look, I've struggled with this because I had the screenplay written. I already had it written. I had already, had this thing created years before that other movie that just came out a few months ago.
Yeah.
But I already had this whole screenplay, and now finally I get the financing. Now I'm putting it together, and he's like, I just had to go through with it. It's like I couldn't, there's already a momentum going on there. I just had to go through with it and go, screw it. Whatever anybody thinks, if they think I stole it, so what? It's like I'm making this movie for me,
But there's also a very, well documented Hollywood game of studios doing similar projects on purpose at the same time to see who can get the better one out. Like, Volcano versus Deep Impact, or Volcano versus Dante's Inferno, Deep Impact versus Armageddon. It's like who can get their Volcano movie out first, who can get their. So that's a game. That's not parallel thinking. That's not synchronicity. That's right. It's like Coke and Pepsi competing for the same audience to see who can make more money. Right. So like that's a well played game in Hollywood. And there's always it always comes in twos,
It is so interesting. It's like someone catches the buzz that this great idea has been brewing for years. And
exactly. They're like, let's get on that first.
Yeah. Yep. I remember I'd see that like at Blockbuster where and I was just joking with my buddy about this the other day about how, okay, let's say for instance, there are all these trailers. Let's say there's all this buzz about a new King Kong coming out in the theaters. New King Kong is on its way. And then you get like some like a Roger Corman type of
Mighty Joe Young.
Yeah, right. And they come out. right. And they're like, okay, let's hurry up. Let's beat him to the punch. Let's come out this thing. Let's ride the wave of the excitement of, it's like they're seeing that this wave is going to come crashing in. Everybody's excited about Godzilla or a new King Kong movie. Okay, all right, let's hurry up and make a smart ape movie.
Which is like the polar opposite of like the kind of magical synchronicity that's cosmically linking us all that we were talking about earlier. That's just pure dollar signs. But that's how Hollywood works. So
now I got to ask you, what are your thoughts about synchronicities? What are your thoughts about those kinds of magical happenings?
There was a point, I don't know, probably a decade ago, I was working on a screenplay, and it was all about synchronicities, and I was like very much feeling the flow of synchronicities. It's kind of my first attempt at a full-length screenplay, and I remember being at the SF MoMA. Because there was an element of paintings in my screenplay, and I was just doing some research, and there was a very eccentric, very strange, very tall, very bearded German guy in our tour group, and like out of nowhere, he seemed to kind of look at me and say, synchronicities are God's way of saying hello. And I know that that's an old term, but I had never heard it before. And it just seemed like the perfect moment and the perfect person and the perfect weirdness to have that said to me.
Yeah.
And that kind of became my definition. It's like, yeah, synchronicity is God's way of saying hello.
That's
it's very subtle, and I like that.
Dude, that's brilliant. You know, because as you described that, it reminds me of like maybe a moment that happens in Twin Peaks where the log lady tells you some very, great piece of wisdom from the log, and you're like, I gotta listen to this. The log lady's telling me this. I got
exactly.
So that's just great, man. That you view the synchronicities in that way, because it's my favorite thing ever in the whole world to talk about. And my dream is to live in a world where as you're at the shopping, as you're at the market, the cashier is talking to the next person in line about their latest dream or their latest synchronicity, or while you're at the street corners, people are talking about synchronicities and all their excitements of seeing these new manifestations of reality happening for them. And I think it's starting to happen more and more. I'm starting to notice more and more of this, at least through TikTok, through Instagram too. I'm starting to see more people kind of diving into the cosmic soup and bringing awareness to it, bringing this wonderful ubiquity to it. So that way it gives people a new perspective as to how their place is within the great puzzle of the universe.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing too. Although also that same cosmic stew is where a lot of these ridiculous conspiracies come up too. So it's like, how do you separate these things that are kind of like pure and beautiful and relatively simple if you really tune into them, versus just hot garbage that's coming from that same cosmic stew of the internet,
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. So synchronicities, like you're saying, it's God's way of saying hi, and that is such a wonderful way of putting it. And every time a synchronicity happens, anytime an epiphany happens, I feel like it's like the cosmic high five. I feel like me and the universe are going, all right, you noticed it, I noticed it. What a great gift. We're both rejoicing in this thing. And what's interesting is, well, first of all, let me ask you this: what are your thoughts about, like, when people talk about the law of attraction or a manifestation of reality? What are your thoughts of that stuff?
Well, I've never really delved into, like, what's your definition of laws of attraction? We might have two different definitions. Okay. So what's yours?
So the idea is that there is us, like, we're just basically slivers of the all that is, like that there's the higher mind, there's these all the beings that are unseeing, that we can't see right now, that are vibrating at a higher level, all of the layers of existence, all the dimensions that are existing, and knowing that we are a piece of that existence, and the fact that we have a relationship with that sort of invisibility, the idea that everyone is a reflection of one another, of the great, the sort of the great prism, and the idea that when you take into that idea of Einstein about how everybody's reality is their own relativity. So like your paradigm, the synchronicities and whatnot that you see are going to be in direct relation to your highest. The idea is to bring about the best version of ourselves, our highest version of ourselves. And when I see pieces of synchronicities filtering through that have so much to do, that echo my highest joys and passions, I'm like, okay, that's another sign, that, okay, good. You know what, we're moving along here. There's another piece of my greater self that's kind of being added on here. And so when I see the synchronicities happening, that directly relate to the things that bring me joy and excitement, that's when I'm like, okay, this is something to pay attention to. And do you notice that when you celebrate synchronicities and whatnot, that more of them happen for you?
Yeah, but I can also see that leading to your lowest self too. See, the way I look at it is that if you can imagine, like, you're surrounded in a circular pattern of infinite breadcrumb trails that go in every direction in a perfect circle around you. And if you think of your brain as a computer that can program your own reality, I think basically once you pick a breadcrumb leading towards a certain direction. Let's say, okay, you want proof that God exists, right? You're basically programming your brain to look for that next breadcrumb and subconsciously point you towards that. Oh, that's where you want to go. So you take that little breadcrumb, and that's your first synchronicity towards your definitive proof that God exists. And you can keep programming your brain to look for these breadcrumbs. So you keep following, and then eventually you will arrive at this conclusion that, oh yes, absolutely, God exists, based on subconsciously programming your brain to look for that specific trail of breadcrumbs. But the opposite can also be true. It's like, if I want proof that demons are real, once you start programming your brain to start looking for those synchronicities, then eventually you'll go to a path. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it shows you the power of the brain, like you said, to create your own reality. But it is programmable. That's the thing. So it's like, yeah, if you are looking for your best self, if you are looking for your best self reflected in your reality, hell yeah, those breadcrumbs are going to keep manifesting as synchronicities, and you're going to go on that trail until you reach that conclusion that, yes, this is meant to, this is meaning, this is depth, this is, purpose. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's
but
like
it can be scary too.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's what's so interesting. I once heard it described that the universe always says yes to whatever we're kind of proclaiming at that moment, or whatever we're believing, our deepest beliefs. So if we're going, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm so dumb, I don't know anything, the universe goes yes. If you go, oh wow, there's so many extraordinary ideas out there I love, and I can find them in anything, it goes yes, and here's more. So it's always giving you whatever. It's just reaffirming. It's like the mirror, it's like you smile at the mirror, it's going, yep, you're smiling, yep, we're smiling, I'm smiling with you. And
it's crazy.
It's so interesting how those little, like you're saying, the breadcrumbs, how those little sort of like snowflakes coming together can then make a snowball, and then you keep rolling that snowball. Now it has the potential of being this avalanche.
Yeah, but it's like to really get to a place of meaning, you have to follow those crumbs for a long time. It's not going to be like, oh, within 24 hours I'm going to achieve enlightenment. It's like, no, you got to keep on that specific path of breadcrumbs until you really find something profound for yourself.
Well, yeah, what's so exciting too is like I realized like a huge lesson was appreciating the process that was happening, and not letting my impatience get in the way of appreciating those moments that were coming to me. Not allowing my impatience of like, okay, when are we going to cross the finish line? When is it going to happen? When is it going to happen?
Yeah.
And just going, okay, this is a process that's happening. If I can just follow I almost view the intuition as like as like the compass needle that's kind of taking you in the direction that you want. And I feel like if we could kind of stay in that moment to moment blissfulness of feeling satisfied or excited about an idea, then there's really no space for impatience or that idea of like, hurry up already, come on, you're taking too long. I feel like we're able to really truly appreciate those moments and feel those gratitude, feel that gratitude as it's coming along. Like this epiphany struck me about the idea of how, like, okay, for instance, let's say right now, I say, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the day when I'm living in my own little town that I've built, and we all just get to talk, about synchronicities freely, openly. Everyone's artistic. It's just a blast. Everyone encourages each other, and as I'm thinking about that, and then when that day actually occurs, actually giving it the full respect of it existing in that moment, and appreciating that dream as it unfolds. Maybe that's a pretty grand, example, but just with anything in life where you're like, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be great if this thing, comes to fruition? And then when that thing comes to fruition, like actually then go, wow, thank you, giving it that gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hard part, because it's like, once you get what you want, there's that moment of like, okay, how long can I hold on to this? Once you're like really, really immersed in a creative headspace where everything is flowing very well and synchronicities are coming at you from every angle, and it's like kind of the story's telling itself. And then at some point there's that deflation, and you have to come back to not reality, but you have to come back to a more, I don't know, metered reality is what I call it, because it's like when you're really caught up in it, it can be all consuming. Like when I'm really in a place of creativity and it's flowing, I'll be up at 5 o'clock every morning for months, just writing. or creating or whatever it is. But then after a while, it kind of ebbs away, and it's still there, but it's like you can't live in that. For me, I can't live in that place all the time. So I have to be able to say, okay, this project is done, and now I can have a little breather before maybe the next big creative output. Do you find that too?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Because what I was noticing in some various projects that I was with, like a project would come to an end, or the thing would actually be happening, or whether it was wanting to see a particular concert, or it could be any of those kinds of things. And what I was noticing was that the idea of, let's see, as things were happening in real time, I was finding that I was not giving it the proper respect. That, like, I came to the revelation, like, okay, what was the point of me even dreaming up this reality if this reality that's happening before my very eyes, if I'm not actually going to congratulate it on its existence or thank it for making its way through the ether into my manifested reality.
I like that, man. That's a good reflection on gratitude. I love that.
Yeah, because I realized, well, what was the point of me even dreaming this thing if I'm not going to,
But when you're in it, the creation is the point when you're in it. But then it's like that post check-in. It's like, okay, now what? Why did I do that? And it's still amazing, but it's like, yeah, you really have to check in yourself. Like, yeah, what was the point of that? I'm always at a point, after a project is over, where I'm like, what was the point of that? But then I always come back to like you said, if it's a success, then you can really land yourself in gratitude and say, like, regardless of where that came from or why it came from, it was finished and people seem to like it, and I'm proud of it, and that's all I could ask for,
Yeah, it's so interesting because there is that, what do they call it? I don't know if it's called post-mortem. I don't know if
post-mortem.
Yeah, after you create the thing. After you create it, you're like, okay, it's done now, and there's kind of like that little bit of that emptiness, where you're going, gosh, I'm no longer in that vibe, in that flow of bringing this world to life. And I mean, that's what's so fun about the universe that you're creating with in Bright Axiom and Grandview Boulevard and all of those great little nuggets that are happening there, is that it's continually satisfying. You can constantly go deeper down the rabbit hole with these things.
It's kind of funny because what I love is that we've done a lot of little tiny side projects in the last 6 years since we started Grandview Boulevard, and we're always finding that we've kind of, not purposely, but we always hide little nuggets just in the background, whether it's like a Grandview Boulevard poster in the background, and then this footage from this other film ends up having all these little hints and clues in the background of our other projects that we can always tie back in. And it's never like conscious. It's never like, okay, if we put a Bright Axiom sticker on the wall of this scene of a completely different film, we're never like, we're going to tie it into the whole universe, but it always ends up happening. So it's really fun to see like these accidental Easter eggs we're leaving for ourselves that tie these universes together.
Oh my gosh, I love it. It's like you're leaving those for your future self to get a big kick out of when they go back to see it again. They go, oh my gosh, this is how this can be used in this. It's it's so interesting, like, because you mentioned earlier that you have improv training, and so do I, and I love it. It's the whole yes and.
I was just going to say that, when you were talking about yes and, it's like that's the prime tenet of improv.
Oh, it's so beautiful because you're in service to the idea. You're in service to this thing that's being created through you, and everybody gives respect to that reality, and that's how they're able to go yes and, because they're putting their ego aside. It's funny. It's like you don't even have to make a conscious decision to put your ego aside if you are in service to that reality. And it's so fun because you guys, you're totally yes anding your way along through these projects. It's just so cool.
And that's where the improv comes in, and because we're not doing it on an intentional level in a lot of ways, then when it does come back and we realize that we can tie these together, like prime example, I did a zombie horror short a couple years ago called Welcome Back, Mr. Buzzcock. And Spencer, he made a fake newspaper article, that opened up the film. It's a death of a science teacher who comes back from the dead. And just for fun, Spencer, on his own accord, decided to put a little tiny advertisement for Crystor in the corner of the newspaper.
Dude.
So when I was trying to, create characters for this Crystor website, I thought, well, Mr. Buzzcock would be kind of funny. It's a sci-fi universe. And I have this newspaper article from this other film. not even remotely thinking about this article that Spencer had totally put in there on his own. And then when I look at the article, I suddenly look in the corner and there's an advertisement for the website that I'm trying to tie this character into. And it was just like this, again, perfect moment of synchronicity. I could not have asked. It was the universe saying, yes, not only is this character from a completely different franchise perfect for Christor, you have a literal commercial for Christor already in the film.
Oh my God.
And that it was not requested by me. I made the film and I did not request that, just so you know. But it was perfect. It was too perfect.
That's so brilliant, because it just shows that there was like there's a higher intelligence that was working through us, and we just go, hey, I don't know why I'm doing this. This just feels fun.
Exactly.
I'm just gonna do this. And then, but the universe knew how that was going to be. You know, it was like, yeah, you just hang on. You'll see how it works. You'll see how it fits together. And it's, man, I those little things are just so exciting to me, and I think that's why, when I'm in the process of creating something, even if something doesn't necessarily make sense at that moment, I'm like, okay, let's fit this in here, because evidently this idea wouldn't have attracted itself to this moment in time. So okay, let's figure out how we fit that in there. And what's so fun is, like, with history, there can always be a backstory that nobody ever knew about that has to tie in with the very thing that you're doing right here. So there's always that thing you can reach into the archives and go, oh, here's this old newspaper article. Oh, did you know that this mixtape was found in this person's car?
It's really fun.
Yeah. Oh,
it's like the puzzle. It's the just shaking up the box of puzzle pieces from completely different jigsaw puzzles, and yet if you really look, you can find the way to fit them all together.
Oh man, it's so fun, because like in the Toll, the guy, he just he talks about, sometimes it's a yellow bridge, and in the movie they go out there and I believe it's green. I believe it looks green at that moment.
The very end of the film,
unless it's supposed to be yellow.
No, it's green. It's green. Yeah, they get transported to a green Golden Gate Bridge dimension. Spoilers.
Which was beautiful, because that stuff. Well, heck, even with that spoiler, there are so many convoluted, layered and textured things going on in that movie. It's like there's so much great stuff to wade through that. I mean, it was just so cool when with the color changing of the bridges, and then just how that fit in with the Verlies Bridge Society.
The Verels Bridge Society. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, but that's another synchronicity too. That again, this I don't know if this is like too much of a curtain reveal, but there's a Discord that goes with Christor Inc., the website we created. And the people on Discord, they were kind of like going through old images online of the Tolls, and one of them, I don't know who it was on Discord, they basically found two old versions of the Tolls posters. At one point it was called the Toll, and then we had to change the name to the Tolls because a bunch of other short randomly synchronicity came out the same year, almost the same year, called the Toll. So we added an S to it, right? So somebody on Discord posted these two posters, the Toll and the Tolls, up above each other. And I was like, that's almost like two different versions of the same movie.
Whoa.
And that's what created the Christor universe multiple dimensions. I'm like, well, let's see what happens if the characters from the Tolls actually exist in parallel dimensions in real life. So we took the filmmakers from the Tolls movie where there's parallel dimensions, and I decided, based on Discord, posting those two posters, like, okay, let's play with that. So now there's one version of the Toll called the Tolls, and another version in a different universe called the Toll. So again, it's like this thing, like that wouldn't have happened unless somebody from Discord put up those two posters so I could see the juxtaposition.
Oh my God.
And then click in that's the parallel universe right there.
Oh,
we had already done the work. We just didn't realize it.
Oh my God, that's awesome, dude.
So
and then it's so fun, because then, especially when you bring parallel universes into the equation, now it's like anything goes. Like anything can be explainable, because like, oh well, that one's happening in that parallel universe.
Yeah, exactly, and it's really fun.
And it really is.
Yeah, and as long as you make the universes distinct enough to say this fits better, and this, like in the Blue Bridge, it's much more like technology based, and I don't know, it's fun to differentiate the different universes.
Well, it's so cool looking through Christor at all the different little links that are on there, and I like seeing that new inventions are being being put up there. That infomercial is just so hilarious. It's so great how authentic and honest it is. It's just I think that's what really pulls it off, is when when things are done without the ironic slant to it, when they're just done so
straight faced. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's when they really when they ring. It's just so true, because there's this it's just steeped in this authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was all Spencer, man. That entire commercial. That's actually Spencer doing the voice.
Thought so.
Yeah,
I thought so.
And it's funny because we never, when we were making Grandview Boulevard, well, that's another synchronicity because it was called the Esquire at one point.
Oh yes.
And then Grandview Boulevard. So it's like in one world, Grandview Boulevard, the Tolls exists, and then in the Toll, it's called the Esquire. So again, you have these two parallel versions of the same movie. But what I was saying, it's like when Spencer made Chris Storer the commercial for Grandview Boulevard / the Esquire, there was never really a discussion about what its purpose or its meaning was. I mean, it was kind of like to sell the device that we had built, but it was so much more elaborate than anything I could have asked for or hoped for. And there was so much weird, just Spencer-ness to it. And I'm glad that we never tried to break it down, because then we could create this entire website later, Chris Storer Inc., to explore. I mean, if it wasn't for that infomercial, Chris Storer Inc. wouldn't exist either. So basically the entire website is created around this infomercial, this random infomercial that Spencer created for the film. And I love that there was never a breakdown of what it all meant, because that would have taken the fun out of it.
Yeah.
Now we can decide 6 years later what this commercial means.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. Oh man. Yeah. It's such a thrill. It's you find actors who act honestly, and are a lot of the actors you work with, are they from improv? Do they do improv?
Yeah, well, my directing partner Liz Anderson, I met her doing improv and acting in the Bay Area. There's a couple improvisers, a lot of local theater people in the film as well. But yeah, I mean, the improv pool is pretty great in San Francisco.
Thank you, everyone, for hanging on, listening to the interview, becoming enlightened by these brand new worlds that are just cracking open. ARGs, alternate reality games. They are like a real life video game, basically. It's like you are, or like Dungeons and Dragons, you have become this character in a story that's unfolding, and on top of that, you're participating in it. It's just thrilling. So keep listening to these episodes, because part 2 will be coming up. All right? Thanks for listening to Inspirado Projecto. If you want to contribute to this episode, to this podcast, you could call the hotline, voicemail. Leave your ideas, your dreams, your epiphanies. 561-203-9179er. 561-203-9179er. Or you can email me, inspiradoprojecto@gmail.com. Give me any found sounds, hysterical laughing, the sound of you chewing your food, the sound of you reading a book, the sound of your cat purring, the sound of you turning on and off a light, whatever you want, the sound of you up close, sounds of you tying your shoes. Could be anything. Pretty much anything. Ideally if it's inspiring, ideally if it's something that's quizzical, curious, good-natured. I'll put it on here. How's about that? I'll put it right on here. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi, this is Jay Ossing from Twin Peaks The Return. You're listening to Inspirado Projecto.